If you're new to JavaScript, you may have heard the terms parameters and arguments used interchangeably. While very similar, there is an important distinction to make between these two keywords. Parameters are used when defining a function. They are the names created in the function definition. Parameter is like a variable that is only meaningful inside of this function. It won't be accessible outside of the function. Arguments are real values passed when making a function call, just like that. So now you know when we use the name arguments and when the name parameters. If we go back to our old example where we created a function called sayHi, it accepts one parameter called first name, and then we can do console.log. In there we say hi, and we have first name. So this is the function we had at the start of our section. Just below that, we are going to make a function call, and we're going to call our function with the value of Joe. If we save this, you're going to get the value of hi Joe right there. So in this example, our function called sayHi accepts one parameter, first name. Parameters can be named anything. The only thing that matters is the order. Let's try replacing the first name with just the name. So if we do this and say one more time, you can see we still do get hi Joe. That works. Nothing changed. Our function still works. That means that parameters are just names we create for the arguments we are planning to pass into the function. As you can see, when calling the function, we have one argument right there. The argument is a real JavaScript value. In this case, it's a string of Joe. Let's try adding another parameter to practice a bit more. Let's say that we want to take in both the name and the age of the person. To do that, we'd need to add a second parameter separated by a comma, and let's call it age. Now we need to also provide an argument to fill in the value of the age. We do that when making a function call. Right there, let's say that our Joe person is 25. Then we can console log. Let's do something like first name or just name is age years old, just like that. Now, if we save this, you can see our function returns Joe is 25 years old, and all of that because we called our sayHi function with the first parameter of name Joe and the second parameter of the age of 25. Just to repeat, name and age are parameters, and Joe and 25 are values that are going to be filled into the parameters called name and the age. There's also one more thing to mention. What if we don't specify the second parameter? What would happen if we did this? As you can see, we get Joe is undefined years old. That means that we are not passing an argument for the parameter of age. When that happens, that parameter automatically receives the value of undefined. It is not defined. So how can we make it if our user doesn't input the age, we always get something and not undefined? For example, in here, we can use something known as a default parameter. We make an equal sign next to the parameter name, and then you specify the default age. For example, we can say 0. If the age is not entered, we get Joe is 0 years old. We can do the same thing for the name. For example, if the user doesn't enter the name, let's delete that argument. We're going to get undefined is 0 years old. And in that case, we can make a default parameter of, for example, Jane. So if there is no name entered, we always get Jane. This doesn't make a lot of sense. We have our sayHi function, which should greet a specific person. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to greet Jane, for example, if no person is specified. When it makes more sense to use default parameters is when using mathematical operations. For example, if we had a function called add, and the function add accepts two parameters, a and b. Now, in there, we are going to return the value of a plus b, and let's call our function with the values of 2 and 2. If we do that, we need to store this in a variable, so const result is going to be equal to add, and then right there, we can console log the result. Okay, we do get 4. But what if something happens if we don't provide a second argument to this function? As you can see, we get nan. That's not good. As you can see, we were expecting to get a number and instead we get not a number. Why did that happen? Well, since we didn't provide a second argument, the value of the b parameter was undefined. In JavaScript, when you try to add the undefined to a number, you're immediately going to get not a number. So what we need to do to make this work is we need to set the default value of this parameter. And there we can set it to 0. If we do this, now you get 2, because if there is no b, the b is going to take the value of 0 instead of just being undefined. We can do the same thing for the a variable. So right now, if we call the function without any parameters, you can see we get 0. But if we do, for example, 3 and 3, we get 6, 3 and 4, it's 7, which means if there are parameters, everything works. But we just made a fail-safe there with default parameters. So if the users don't pass variables, that's not going to break our program. We are still going to return the number of 0.